confound us. They actually are an extension of the kind of study that people did in the temple when they gathered in the synagogue, when they looked at the Torah or other scriptures and examined them very intentionally, deeply, wondering at each tiny difference in a word. That practice continues even today. If you have Jewish friends, you might hear them say that they are studying Torah on Tuesday morning with a friend. And that's what they mean. They are looking very deeply into what might be meant by the text. You probably have heard the notion of speaking of the kingdom as the kingdom of God. I like this idea, and I think Jesus would as well. The word kingdom evokes ideas of domination and power and control, whereas the word kingdom lifts up the importance of relationship. And isn't that what Jesus was all about? Going about the countryside, gathering all people to him. So let's take a look at one of these parables we read this morning, the very shortest one sentence. Many of the translations speak of it this way, similar to what we heard in the J.B. Phillips translation this morning. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast, taken by a woman and put into 3 measures of flour, until the whole lot had risen. Okay, isn't that what yeast is supposed to do? 3 measures of flour? We might think that that was something like 3 cups of flour that we add a little yeast packet to. Well, no, it's not. So let's look at some other translations and see what they might tell us. In this particular verse, we could find the King James Version to be helpful. Another parable he spoke to them. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven, which a woman took and hid in 3 measures of meal, till it was all leavened. Okay, leavening is a little different idea. Those of you who cook or bake are familiar with the idea that there are all sorts of different products or naturally occurring elements that are used for leavening something that you bake. It might be an egg. It might be baking powder or baking soda, something that we might not think is as naturally occurring as yeast. But leaven in those days was not the little packets of fast-rising yeast we buy today that sit on the shelf or in the refrigerator for months and months until inspiration strikes us and we pull out a recipe that we remember from our grandmother or our mother, or something that we had been baking for our family for a very long time. No, for an old-fashioned parable such as this one, we need an old-fashioned word. Leaven in those days was not the little packet of yeast, but it was more like a sourdough starter that we know about today. And a starter must be tended and fed to be ready for baking tomorrow or next week or a month from now. They say that some of the most prized starters have been tended for years, even decades, and sometimes centuries, believe it or not. But that, as we know, was not the Jewish practice, because every year at Passover, all the yeast, all the leaven, everything in the household was diligently cleaned out so that they could start afresh. They knew that leavening, like relationships, could go bad. There might be a hot spell or a delay in feeding, and the sour smell would turn foul and putrid, and it would be time to throw out the whole batch and start over. So now that we have a better idea of the ingredient of leavening or yeast, let's look at yet another translation. In the New Revised Standard Version, we hear, "He told them still another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed into about 60 pounds of flour until it worked all through the dough." Now, 60 pounds, 3 measures of flour, that sounds a little different to our 21st century ears, doesn't it? 60 pounds, picture it. 6 of the 10-pound bags of flour, not the 5-pound ones that we mostly carry home, but the big bags, okay, would probably take up about half a shopping cart, right? 5 pounds equal about 18 cups of flour. 10 pounds, 36 by 6, you get the idea. But put another way, if we think about how much bread we could make out of that, each loaf of bread uses about a pound of flour. That's regular loaves, not flatbread. So 3 measures of flour, 60 pounds of flour, would make about 60 loaves today. Now we know that those 3 measures of flour is about the amount that one might have asked for when visiting the mill for a month's supply of bread or flour. This isn't just your family's supper. It's a meal for a festive occasion, a wedding, a homecoming, dinner for a crowd, a reunion, even the entire town. Now we might begin to ask what good it would possibly do to hide a little leavening in such a vast quantity of flour. That's a question that is like each of us wondering what we can possibly do to influence things that are going on in our community and the world. When we find ourselves looking at the enormity of the needs of our neighbors and of the world challenges, I think that's the question many people ask. What good can I possibly do? What difference can I possibly make? I'll bet you've heard people ask that question. Well, I think that Jesus might want us to consider our work in the light of the readings we read this morning. And also, perhaps, in a few verses from a text we didn't read, which is also part of the lectionary today. In Romans chapter 8, verses 26 and 27, the Apostle Paul says, Likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. For we do not know how to pray as we ought. But that very Spirit intercedes with groanings too deep for words. And God, who searches the heart, knows what is in the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. When we are feeling small, Paul suggests that we remember that the Spirit is right there within us and beside us, knowing our potential, knowing that we make too little of ourselves. But the parable and Paul's words suggest that even when we cannot see what is happening behind the scenes, God is at work in and through us, in our work of mission and in the pursuit of justice, in our efforts at hospitality within the church here and in the broader community. When we nurture the yeast, the leavening, and rely on God's grace to be at work along beside us. You see, I believe Jesus is asking us to nurture all our relationships. I was reminded of this, and thinking about it, I remembered the autobiography, or one of them, of Maya Angelou. As you know, it's 4 volumes. Her mother, she said, in speaking about relationships, told Maya that if she had only one smile to give away that day, she should give it to someone at home. Don't go out and waste it on the street on someone you don't even know. She said to give that one smile to someone at home. Perhaps it was her mother's equivalent of saying, charity begins at home. Practice at home, and then take it out on the streets. I don't think Miss Angelou's reference to her mother's instruction was meant to negate the importance of kindness to others, but rather it was meant to be a first step, meaning that the kindness one practices at home becomes a habit. It becomes a way of life. And Maya took this teaching from her mother and those she learned growing up with her grandmother. She took the teachings from the Unity Church of her young adulthood and from her many and diverse life experiences, and became one of the most warm and generous of people, sharing her wisdom through language and art for the duration of her many years. In recent years, before her death, in an interview with Oprah Winfrey, she was asked, "So what words do you turn to for comfort?" Her answer was simply, love. And then she elaborated, love is that condition of the human spirit so profound that it allows us to forgive. And isn't this exactly what Jesus taught? I think this statement gets to the core of his teachings. Love well. Nurture relationship. Practice at home and spread that love generously around. When we attend diligently to Jesus' teachings about our relationships with one another, our small efforts can grow and become something powerful. Our practice of kindness in this place grows and spreads in our homes, and even in our mundane routine activities, and it becomes a means for spreading the good news of God's love and care and forgiveness for everyone. We're called to be generous, even extravagant in our sharing. We need always to remember Jesus' teachings about the power of a little leavening to grow into a movement to nurture and to love all people, even our enemies. So let us remember Jesus' call to love one another so that we are moved to live it out in our words and actions. Amen.
Amen.